In this video, we're actually going to be talking about beta-carotene. I've got a lot of research to go over with the benefits around skin health, tone change, and some of the science and maybe some of the concerns towards the end that we can talk about as well. I'm going to dive into some of the deep research about what beta-carotene is, why you might want to consume it, why you may not want to if you're a certain small case of the population, as well as what it can do for your skin tone, your overall skin health, really just what it is. So first of all, beta-carotene is the plant form of vitamin A retinol. It's actually a pigment that is found in fruits, in vegetables. It's what gives the golden hue of pumpkins, carrots, sweet potatoes, yams. It's that golden orange yellowish hue that you get from these. Interestingly enough, beta-carotene is also a precursor for vitamin A retinol, meaning that humans, when they consume beta-carotene, if they're not getting vitamin A retinol in their diet, the body can actually convert it. Now, it's not amazingly efficient, but it's effective. Beta-carotene is unique in that you can consume an abundance of it through your fruits and vegetables, and it can boost the keratin receptors in your skin. Your body chooses what it wants to do as far as consuming vitamin A. Now, beta-carotene falls in the class of antioxidants called carotenoids. There's a whole class of these pigments in fruits and vegetables that give them their golden, reddish, orange hue. Another well-known carotenoid is astaxanthin. You may have heard of it. It's in salmon, it's in shrimp. It gives the red pigment, as well as lutein and lycopene, which is in tomatoes, which gives them that red. Now, what's interesting is the skin is made up of keratinocytes. Beta-carotene can actually accumulate in your skin. So one of the main things recently discovered in the science around beta-carotene is that it's not only an antioxidant, but it actually has the ability to effectively change the color of your skin. And I've done a video on this before on the channel, and there's two axes where your skin has a color to it. One is the melanin axis, and the other is the keratin axis. And when you consume a diet rich in fruits and vegetable pigments, these carotenoids in particular, you will actually see that the axis of the keratin will develop this sort of flush, this post-vacation glow flush color that you see, the more golden reddish hue versus the melanin brownish tan. Now, beta-carotene acts as an antioxidant. What that means is when you get oxidative stress, things oxidize, it can go out and it can neutralize the free radicals in the oxidative stress, slow that oxidative stress. It can accumulate that pigment in the skin to create this golden orange undertone. So we're gonna dive into some of the science here now for those of you who really wanna get nerdy about beta-carotene and the pros and cons. And we're gonna look at the studies and the actual details. But just as a quick summary and synopsis of these studies, we're talking about noticeable skin tone change. There was a study also done for attractiveness increased. There was also a reduced redness study, meaning when you get sun, there is this condition called erythema after you've had UV exposure where your skin turns red, which shows the tenderness of your skin after you've been exposed to the sun, and it can reduce that redness. This is a term that refers to the redness your skin develops after it's been exposed to UV, and it can be reduced through these carotenoid antioxidants. And some of the more shaky comments around the anti-cancer properties, there's not a lot of evidence there, and we're not gonna make any claims that that science really exists there. Beta-carotene is generally safe. The one exception is for the class of heavy smokers. There has been studies done, and we'll get into this at the end of the video. I've got timestamps to break this down, so you can skip ahead if you really want to learn about that. Let's get into the studies around the skin attractiveness, then we'll come back to the actual safety and efficacy. So for carotenoid and melanin tans, there was a study done by Stephen et al. In 2011, this was 14 years ago, where they measured the skin tone change. There were 29 individuals. This was done in the UK. And they had these individuals measure their dietary intake in natural skin color. And then they looked at the simulation of higher carotenoid and melanin pigmentation. And observers then rated faces for health and attractiveness. Basically, 29 participants, the observers rated the perceived health and attractiveness. And the key findings were that the carotenoid intake, the pigmentation, and consistently boosted the perception that the individuals were healthy and attractive. You can imagine looking in the UK at individuals that are very pale, and they consume these carotenoids, which accumulate in their keratin receptors in their skin, and it develops this flush and glow, and they stand out because they're actually looking like they're showing the diet and the richness of their diet on their skin and looking like they have more color. Now, this was done with dietary equivalent of 6 to 9 milligrams of beta-carotene per day, and the observation window was 6 to 12 weeks of consumption. In addition to this, and this is something we see in Western society versus Eastern, the carotenoid glow was judged as more positively than the melanin tans, meaning that the carotenoid axis tan was more attractive than the melanin. Second study was done where they were consuming high carotenoids. They were looking at the influence of the plasma levels in young women and their skin color. This was a single-blind randomized control trial, meaning that the participants were unaware of what was going on. The researchers did know what was going on. A double blind would be they both don't know. And in this case, they also randomized and crossed over. So they were random, and then they actually switched roles with the participants to show what was going on afterwards. So this was a study that was done over 4 weeks where they gave a high carotenoid diet equivalent to roughly 6 to 9 milligrams of beta-carotene daily, and they then switched in comparison to a low carotenoid diet over the course of actually 4 weeks. So there was a 4-week period, they gave a high carotenoid diet, and then there was a 4-week period where they gave a low carotenoid diet, and then they compared the skin tone on sun-exposed and non-exposed areas via reflectance spectroscopy, the plasma carotenoid levels, and what they found was that the high carotenoid diet significantly increased the skin's color tone on both exposed and unexposed areas, meaning that the plasma carotenoids rose significantly with the diet, and the skin color correlated strongly with plasma carotenoid levels. This interpretation was basically that there was direct experimental evidence that the carotenoids accumulated in the skin from the diet, and there was a visible alteration of the skin color within just 4 weeks. So there was a supplementation using beta-carotene in a Fu et al. 2012 study where they actually looked at facial color and attractiveness. This study was designed where it was a double blind, meaning both the researchers and the participants did not know what was going on. There was a placebo control where it was 43 Caucasian men. Ages were around 22 years old, so relatively young. One group took the beta-carotene supplement, the other took a placebo for 12 weeks. Now, the outcomes measured were facial skin color via spectrophotometry, the observers rating the attractiveness and perceived health through key findings. They gave the participants the beta-carotene for 12 weeks. There were 43 men, and there was a significant increase in their skin color. Supplemented participants were rated as more attractive and healthier looking, and there was no measurable change in real health markers, meaning there was no increase or problems with immune or oxidative stress. The interpretation was that the high dose of beta-carotene clearly shifts facial coloration and boosts the attractiveness ratings, independent of health changes, and demonstrates that Caucasian supplementation of beta-carotene improved the perceived attractiveness and coloration. All right, this study was done in 2002, so a little bit before our time, and this was related to skin color and also UV sensitivity. So they actually looked at beta-carotene and wanted to measure how it contributed to normal human skin color. And they took 22 adult Caucasians, skin type number 2. They measured their skin color, their dietary intake, and skin carotenoid content and UV sensitivity. So what this happened to be was looking at the UV tolerance threshold, and they looked at a Raman spectroscopy. They saw strong correlations between the skin carotenoid and color across multiple body sites, both the forehead, arms, and forearm and back. And they linked higher carotenoid intakes to greater UV tolerance. Very interesting, right? A stronger ability to withstand ultraviolet light from the sun when consuming these carotenoid pigments. The final interpretation was that diet was the main cause of the skin carotenoid levels, and in the diet, the carotenoids accumulated in the skin. At 5 to 10 milligrams of these carotenoids, they accumulated in the skin and contributed to golden undertones and an enhancement in the UV resilience. So these last 2 studies I'm going to talk about are moderate and maybe not so strong, but the next one is quite interesting. So beta-carotene consumption in evidence-based health benefits supported by human trials. There was a UV protection and sunborn tolerance study done by Heinrich et al. In 2003, where they gave participants 24 milligrams of beta-carotene and mixed in carotenoids for 12 weeks and reduced UV erythema and increased their med value, meaning the sun tolerance. So both the redness from post-sun exposure and the ability for the DNA in the skin not to break down so easily were improved by consumption of beta-carotene over a period of 12 weeks. Photoprotection is best documented skin effects. Another study done by Stahl et al., they combined beta-carotene with lycopene, and it reduced the skin sensitivity to UV over 8 to 12 weeks. Now, there's some indirect studies around collagen elasticity support, anti-aging effects, and barrier and wound healing function. I'm not going to state all these studies because they're not purely beta-carotene. There's no strong random control trials done with beta-carotene alone that measure collagen directly. There are studies done where there's multiple carotenoid blends, beta-carotene with lycopene and lutein, and a combination of vitamin C and E. In that study, they did see reduced oxidative stress. Beta-carotene showed plausibility to collagen breakdown prevention under UV exposure. One, there is a noticeable shift in skin tone when you consume these pigments, specifically beta-carotene. Two, there's improvements in perceived attractiveness, at least in Western society, with that carotenoid axis. And three, there is the mention of the reduce of erythema. So there's erythema and there's UV med value. These two measurements, the former is the reduction in redness from your skin being exposed to the sun, whereas the UV med value is actually a measurement of how your DNA breaks down when UV hits it and how resilient your skin is to that. Let's bring this all home. So we know beta-carotene is plant form of vitamin A. It's a pigment found in pumpkins, sweet potatoes, carrots. You can consume those in high quantities and definitely build up these pigments and these carotenoids in your body naturally. Your liver converts what it needs from beta-carotene to vitamin A retinol form, animal form, although it's not great and highly efficient as just consuming straight vitamin A. So keep that in mind. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that there are 3 or 4 main benefits. You're looking at a carotenoid lift in your skin tone. You're looking at a perceived attractiveness, at least in Western cultures, in Caucasian society, where people see this color and they're more attracted to the richness of maybe your diet and consumption of these pigments. Maybe a sign evolutionarily that we were able to access food and our health just looked more vital because of that through our skin. And then a higher med value in terms of our skin's response to that UV exposure and reduction in the redness post sun exposure, and a reduced erythema after UV exposure, meaning that our skin handles UV exposure better. It's not as red from post sun exposure, as well as a higher med value, UV tolerance. So our skin is likely to withstand a higher med value, meaning that our skin is more UV tolerant, better in withstanding sun exposure without breaking down. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room around beta-carotene. When you search it, you'll probably learn that there's some risk of cancer, and it's very strange, right? I looked into this quite a bit, and so there's 2 big studies that were done. One was with 29,000 male smokers in Finland, where they consumed at least 5 cigarettes a day, and they gave them 20 milligrams of beta-carotene daily for 5 to 8 years, and the smokers receiving the beta-carotene had a 16% increased relative risk. That means if they were already at risk, they saw a 16% increase. In terms of absolute risk, it was less than 1%, meaning if you were not at risk for getting lung cancer because you were smoking already, you were preconditioned to it, you had a less than 1% risk. So in my mind, it's very much, if you look at the data, and if you are a smoker, you may be mindful, but it still is very much 20 milligrams is quite a bit, and you're consuming it for 5 to 8 milligrams. Now, the second study was actually paused because they gave the participants 30 milligrams of beta-carotene. They saw a 36% higher lung cancer incidence of relative risk. And that was significant enough where they said, hey, there's something going on with people when they consume beta-carotene in these high quantities for a long period of time, and they are smokers. And I tried to break this down into sort of high school language, right? So normally beta-carotene is an antioxidant and it neutralizes free radicals and protects your skin cells in a normal body. Even supplementing at doses, it's generally safe and benefit. But in smoker's lung, in that environment, it's totally different. There's a constant flood of free radicals from cigarette smoke, plus high oxygen levels. And in that setting, high doses of beta-carotene can flip roles, and instead of neutralizing those free radicals, it starts to break down into oxidative byproducts like carotenoids. Now, these byproducts can act as pro-oxidants, creating even more oxidative stress instead of reducing it. And this can interfere with retinoic acid signaling, such as what's crucial for controlling cell growth and repairing lung tissue, and upregulate growth translated transcription factors like AP1. So this is all a bunch of big science, but the long story short of it is, if you're a smoker, don't take beta-carotene. I'm sure in the diet you can get a little bit, it's not gonna be that crazy, but if you're taking it as a supplement, be mindful of that. And frankly, you probably shouldn't smoke, but that's another video for another time. The main thing of here is I just wanted to cover off on all the studies. Beta-carotene is shown to be quite safe at dosing under 10 milligrams, but if you are a smoker, that's one place where you wanna be mindful of it. Other than that, it's been studied and it's been observed to improve your attractiveness, your tone shift, and your color of your skin in the keratin sites. It's also been shown to improve your skin's ability to handle sun exposure and the reducing of redness from sun exposure. So hope that helps. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far in the video, highly impressed, and I appreciate you sticking along. And I'd love to hear your comments down below if you've experimented with beta-carotene, if you've consumed keratin-rich foods with beta-carotene, and seen or experienced the benefits of skin health and the overall attractiveness and tone in your skin. All right, I'll see you in the next video, and thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.